Nobody in the compound dared to challenge Mr. Okoro. For years, he had ruled his tenants with fear. He decided when they could use water. He decided how much they should contribute for electricity. He collected money for repairs, cleaning, security, and almost anything else he could think of. And whenever anyone questioned him, he always gave the same answer: "This is my property. I make the rules." But one morning, Mr. Okoro made the biggest mistake of his life. He threw a young woman out of his compound. He scattered her clothes, bags, cooking pots, and other belongings across the dusty ground. The woman stood there with tears in her eyes as the landlord pointed angrily toward the gate. What Mr. Okoro didn't know was that the woman standing in front of him was not an ordinary tenant. And before that day was over, he was going to discover exactly who she was. 3 months earlier, life in the compound was already difficult. Mr. Okoro was a proud and intimidating man. He believed that because he owned the property, every tenant had to obey him without question. One afternoon, a tenant named Ton approached him about the water bill. Ton reminded him that he had already paid. But Mr. Okoro simply told him to pay again. When Ton asked why, Mr. Okoro became angry. He told him not to ask too many questions. Ton walked away shaking his head. Under his breath, he muttered that one day Mr. Okoro would probably start charging them for breathing. Unfortunately, Mr. Okoro heard him. Ton quickly changed his words and pretended he was talking about the weather. The other tenants laughed quietly. But nobody laughed too loudly. Everyone knew better than to challenge their landlord. Then, one afternoon, a new tenant arrived. Her name was Amaka. She was about 30 years old. She was calm, respectful, and neatly dressed. She carried 2 bags as she entered the compound. Mr. Okoro immediately approached her. He asked if her rent had been paid. He asked if the agreement had been signed. Then he warned her about his rules. No unnecessary visitors. No loud noise. No interference in other people's business. Amaka politely agreed. She didn't argue. She simply smiled and carried her bags into her new room. As Mr. Okoro walked away, an elderly tenant named Mama Ejiro quietly approached her. Mama Ejiro looked around to make sure Mr. Okoro wasn't listening. Then she warned Amaka to be careful. Amaka asked why. Mama Ejiro simply pointed toward the landlord and told her to be careful with him. Then she walked away. Amaka watched her disappear into her room. She didn't understand why everyone was afraid of Mr. Okoro. But she would soon find out. A few weeks passed. Amaka settled into the compound. Then the landlord began making demands. One morning, he complained that Amaka had used too much electricity. When she reminded him that she paid her electricity bill, he demanded another payment. Amaka asked what the payment was for. Mr. Okoro simply told her to pay. She did not argue. But she noticed something. Every tenant seemed to be paying one strange fee or another. Water fee. Generator fee. Cleaning fee. Security fee. Maintenance fee. Sometimes, nobody even knew exactly what the money was being used for. Amaka quietly began paying attention. She didn't complain. She didn't insult the landlord. She simply watched. One afternoon, Mr. Okoro called a compound meeting. Everyone gathered outside. He announced that every tenant had to pay 20,000 naira for renovation. The tenants were shocked. Mama Ejiro reminded him that they had already contributed money for renovation the previous month. Mr. Okoro became angry. He said the previous money was for a different renovation. Nobody understood what that meant. Then Amaka calmly asked if they could see the breakdown of the money. The entire compound went silent. Mr. Okoro stared at her. He asked who had given her permission to speak. Amaka calmly explained that she was only asking because everyone was paying. Mr. Okoro warned her that she was new and should not start causing trouble. Amaka simply nodded. But from that day, Mr. Okoro began watching her carefully. Something about her bothered him. She wasn't afraid of him. She asked questions. She kept records. And whenever he threatened her, she remained calm. He began wondering who this woman truly was. What Mr. Okoro didn't know was that Amaka was also watching him. Every time he collected money, she kept a record. Every payment. Every message. Every threat. Every demand. She carefully documented everything. At night, while everyone else was sleeping, Amaka would sit quietly in her room and examine the receipts and messages she had collected. She wasn't trying to cause trouble. She was trying to understand the truth. And slowly, she began seeing a pattern. The tenants had been afraid of Mr. Okoro for years. And because they were afraid, they rarely challenged him. But Amaka had a reason for remaining calm. She knew something they didn't know. One evening, Mr. Okoro finally confronted her. He told her she had 1 week to leave. Amaka reminded him that her rent had not expired. But he didn't care. He told her that it was his property and he could decide who stayed there. Amaka looked at him calmly. Then she asked, "Are you sure?" For a moment, Mr. Okoro was confused. He asked what she meant. Amaka simply told him she had said nothing. But inside, she knew the time was getting close. That night, she made a phone call. She told the person on the other end that it was time. After 3 months of waiting, she was finally ready. The eviction happened exactly as Mr. Okoro had planned. He ordered Amaka's belongings removed from her room. Her clothes. Her bags. Her cooking pots. Everything was scattered outside. The tenants watched helplessly. Mama Ejiro felt sorry for her. She wanted to speak, but she was afraid. Mr. Okoro pointed toward the gate. He told Amaka to leave. Amaka asked where she was supposed to go. He told her that wasn't his problem. Then he reminded her that he was the landlord. Amaka looked at him. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply told him that he would regret what he had done. Mr. Okoro laughed. He thought she was threatening him. But she wasn't. She was warning him. Just as Amaka was about to leave the compound, something unexpected happened. A black SUV entered through the gate. Everyone turned to look. The vehicle stopped. A well-dressed man stepped out carrying a large folder. He walked straight toward Amaka. Then he greeted her respectfully. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Williams." The tenants looked at each other. Mr. Okoro frowned. "Mrs. Williams." He looked at Amaka. Then he looked at the lawyer. He asked who the man was. The lawyer calmly introduced himself as the legal representative of the new owner of the property. Mr. Okoro laughed nervously. He asked who the new owner was. The lawyer turned toward Amaka. And that's when everything changed. He told Mr. Okoro that the property had been legally purchased 3 months earlier. By Mrs. Amaka Williams. The compound became completely silent. Mr. Okoro couldn't believe what he had heard. He looked at Amaka. Then he looked at the lawyer. Then back at Amaka. He asked if she was the new owner. Amaka calmly said yes. Mr. Okoro was speechless. The woman he had treated like a powerless tenant was actually the new owner of the property. The woman he had threatened was the person who now had authority over the compound. The woman he had just thrown out was the person who had legally bought the house. Mr. Okoro asked why she hadn't told him from the beginning. Amaka explained that she wanted to see how he treated people when he thought they had nothing. She had heard complaints about him. But she didn't want to judge him based only on what people said. So she became a tenant. She lived among the people he controlled. She watched how he behaved. She experienced the same treatment they experienced. And now she knew the truth. Then the lawyer opened his folder. Inside were records, payment receipts, messages, complaints, evidence of unauthorized fees, evidence of threats, evidence showing how Mr. Okoro had treated the tenants. The landlord's confidence disappeared. He realized that Amaka had been documenting everything. He had thought nobody was paying attention. But someone had been watching. Someone had been keeping records. And now the evidence was sitting in front of him. For the first time, the tenants found the courage to speak. Ton admitted that they had all been afraid of Mr. Okoro. Mama Ejiro said they had suffered for years. The landlord stood quietly. The same man who had once shouted at everyone was now standing without words. Finally, he approached Amaka. He apologized. He admitted that he had allowed power to change him. He said he thought owning property made him better than his tenants. Amaka told him that owning property didn't make anyone more important than another person. She told him that a person's true character was revealed by how they treated people they believed were beneath them. Mr. Okoro lowered his head. For the first time, he understood. After that day, the compound changed. The mysterious fee stopped. The tenants received proper agreements. The water system was repaired. The generator contributions became transparent. Nobody was threatened for asking questions. And slowly, the compound became peaceful. Mama Ejiro could finally sit outside without fear. Ton could make jokes without worrying that he would receive another strange bill. And the tenants finally felt that the place they called home was actually their home. One evening, Mr. Okoro approached Amaka before leaving. He apologized again. He admitted that he had believed power came from owning property. But he had learned something. Power without character could turn a person into a tyrant. Amaka accepted his apology. But she reminded him that forgiveness did not mean there should be no consequences. Mr. Okoro nodded. Then he walked away. And that was how the landlord who thought he could throw anyone out ended up discovering that the woman he had thrown out was the very woman who owned the house. He had judged Amaka by her appearance. He assumed that because she dressed simply and lived like an ordinary tenant, she had nothing. But he was wrong. And sometimes, that is the biggest mistake people make. They judge someone by what they see today, without knowing what that person has already achieved. So remember, never look down on people because of their current situation. Never use your position to humiliate someone. And never assume that someone is powerless simply because they are quiet. Because you never know who is standing in front of you. And if you were Amaka, would you forgive Mr. Okoro? Would you give him another chance? Tell me what you would do in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more Nigerian stories filled with drama, mystery, lessons, and unexpected twists. Because sometimes, the person you think has nothing is the person who has everything.